Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and for today's cards I decided to take my all-time favorite honeybee stamp set, the Zen Bouquet, and make a Christmas card with it, or two Christmas cards is the case. So I started off with some Canson XL watercolor paper, and this is cut to roughly 6 inches by 8.5 inches. And I put it into my MISTI precision stamper, and then I used my anti-static powder tool on the watercolor paper, and then I inked up the large Zen Bouquet image with Versamark ink, and I made sure to kind of stamp it in as much in the center, tried to line it up in the center as possible because I want to cut this in half down the road and get 2 cards out of it. So after I stamped it, I coated the entire image with Nuvo's white embossing powder. And this is always the part for me where it's like the magic kind of just starts happening, because when you stamp with a Versamark on watercolor paper, you can't see anything, or I can't see anything. I'm not even sure, if it's there. And then you pour on the embossing powder and it's like, okay, it worked. So once it was all coated with the embossing powder, I used my heat tool, and it takes a while to heat embossing powder, even when you let your heat tool heat up, which I recommend. It takes a little while to get it to melt when you're melting on watercolor paper because it's so heavyweight. But got it all melted, and then for my watercoloring, I super sped this up just because I'm not doing anything super special. I'm just using my Tombow markers here and applying the color with the marker, pulling it out with a water brush. That's it. I'm not layering colors. I'm not doing any fancy blending, nothing. This was really, really simple. I kept the image sheet of the stamps right beside this because since it's white on white, it's kind of difficult to see. And because it's such a big cluster of all these different images of flowers, it's kind of hard to tell, like, what's this? Is this a flower? Is this a leaf? But once you get going, it all starts to kind of come together a bit more. And for my colors, I chose just several reds and greens. I didn't write down which ones I used. I just was grabbing them at random. I just wanted different shades of reds for the flowers and different shades of greens for the leaves, since I wanted to make this into a Christmas card. Any coloring method would work with this. You could use the Zig Clean Color Real brush markers, traditional watercolors. I was going to use distress inks and a water brush, which I use a lot, especially with this stamp set, because that's kind of my go-to. But I thought this time I would just use these, just because it's been a while since I pulled them out. So like I said, I super sped this up. It honestly didn't take that long to do, but I wanted to make sure I got all the flowers colored with all the different shades of red, and then all the greenery, do all these different shades of green, just to kind of pull it all together. So I was tempted to do my kind of faux watercoloring that I do with the distress inks when I like rub them directly onto the paper and spray with water, etc. I wish I had time to try that with this, but it's very finicky when you're using red and green because most of the time it turns out to a muddy mess. So this was more predictable in its results. So once everything's completely dry, I let it sit for a few minutes and made sure everything was dry. I mixed up, I just added some water to one of the Gansai Tambi Starry colors, this bright gold color. I think it's just called yellow gold. So sprayed it with water, and then you have to work it up quite a bit with your brush to really get the pigment kind of mixed around. And then I just scrape that onto an acrylic block, and I'm going to flick my paintbrush against the block to create some gold splatter. That's going to be my embellishment. I ended up getting one large blob dropping off there, but I didn't worry about it. Got all my splatter on there first, and then I just kind of soaked up that large blob with a baby wipe, and then kind of just brushed it out a tiny little bit with my brush, and then I was okay with it. I just didn't want it to be that big, obvious, huge blob. The rest of them I was okay with. So again, let everything completely dry, and then I'm going to cut this piece in half with my paper cutter, and then I ran these through my Big Shot machine with the largest of the A2 double stitched frame dies, so they'll have that nice wide stitching all around the perimeter. And then for my sentiment, since these are going to be Christmas cards, I'm using the Merry Christmas honey cut die set, and I die cut the Christmas and the holiday words from some gold glitter paper. And then the word bubbles, or the outlines, I die cut from vellum. And then I'm just using my tweezers to hold these little die cuts and coating them with multimedia matte adhesive. I was getting ahead of myself with this, and I wasn't thinking, like I was just creating, flying by the seat of my pants like I usually do. Looking back, it's like I would have run the glitter paper through either my sticker maker or my Xyron machine, or backed it with sticky adhesive before die cutting it. Then I wouldn't have had to sit and fiddle with the multimedia mat. Again, didn't take me very long, but when you're dealing with such fine die cuts, that is a quicker and easier alternative. However, I don't have a whole lot of difficulty. I just apply very small amounts of the multimedia mat because I don't want it oozing out, especially on top of vellum, because you can see it more on vellum. But I applied all the little die cuts to their bubble, and then popped the little dot to the eye out there and pressed that into place. And then I repeated the same steps for the Christmas word die cut. And then for the merry and the happy, my go-to usually is, I just like knee-jerk reaction is to do black cardstock when I'm heat embossing sentiments. But I knew the black would really stand out on these, so I took red and green cardstock instead and stamped the merry and the happy from the same Merry Christmas coordinating stamp set with the Versamark ink, and then coated it with that same Nuvo white embossing powder. Melted both of these with my heat tool. Once they were both melted and had a few seconds to cool off, I used the coordinating bubble dies or outline dies for both of these, got them in place, and then I just taped them into place with some post-it tape just to hold those in place when I run them through my machine. And then both of those are die cut. So now that my sentiments are done, I can adhere them to these watercolor panels. So same thing, I'm using my multimedia matte adhesive and I'm running it just behind the actual die cut letters so that you cannot see that through the vellum. Really thin lines, just hiding it behind the die cuts. Really easy. It doesn't have to completely, you don't have to completely coat it because it's such a lightweight piece with the vellum and the glitter paper. It doesn't really need much adhesive to hold it really well. But just get that on there, press it onto my card front. I use the same adhesive to adhere the word happy. And then I just put a couple of acrylic blocks on top of it just to hold it flat so it can really bond with that watercolor paper. And then I did the exact same thing with the other one. And then to adhere these to my card fronts, I'm actually just using some craft foam. And I pulled the red out of my stash because I have tons of it. And I cut it down to just slightly smaller than those watercolor pieces. Coated the one side of the craft foam with my Xyron Mega Runner. Press that to the card front. And then I'm going to apply the Xyron Mega Runner again to the back of the craft foam. And I'm going to layer these onto some champagne glitter cardstock that I want to be, that's going to cover the complete front of my card. So I've got the gold glitter of the sentiment and then that champagne-y, which is kind of gold-ish, just not as dark, glitter peeking out around these watercolor panels. And those will completely cover both my card fronts because they're cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So once I've got both my fronts attached with that craft foam, I want to finish off my card bases. So it's heavyweight white cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and I scored at 5.5, so they'll be top folding A2 size cards. And I'm lining these up again in my MISTI so I can stamp the sentiment from the Merry and Bright stamp set from Honeybee. So the main Merry and Bright words I'm inking up with green ink that matches the green cardstock. So stamp that twice on the inside of the card, did the same thing on the second card, and then I lined up the May Your Days Be and lined those up along the top of these words and then inked it up with a red ink. Same thing, stamped on the inside of the first card, put the second card base in there, stamped it on that one, and that finished off both of the insides of my cards. So once those are done, all I have to do is apply adhesive to the back of my card fronts, which is going to be my Xyron Mega Runner again. I'm going to run that around the perimeter, run a little bit down the middle just to make sure everything stays good and adhered, and then I can adhere both of these to my card bases. And I did think about adding, sequins and rhinestones and different things, but decided not to. I thought with just the gold glitter of the sentiments and the card base and then the gold splatter from the watercolor, that was enough embellishments for this time. So those are both of my cards using the Honeybee Stamps Zen Bouquet stamp set along with their Merry Christmas dies and Merry and Bright stamp set. If you're interested in any of the supplies used, I will have those linked below the video as well as on the blog post. So check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!